Audit and Risk Management Committee. I would like to welcome this morning, we've got our external auditors here, our new external auditors here today from Grant Thornton, who are Lindsay Robertson and Joe Brown, and they will be taking us through item 6 later on the agenda, where we will meet them then. So welcome. Could we go first of all to Sederunt and apologies, please, Claire?
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. We have 8 members present this morning and 3 apologies from Councillors Dykes, Drybrough and Geddes.
Thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest as an item 2? No. Good. Could we go to the minutes of the meetings of the 22nd of September, which are for noting? Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, before you get to is it an accurate minute, could I turn to page 4 of 72, where it refers to the external auditor's report on Stranraer Slipway, and then to 6.1, and in particular reference to 6.2, where it says, agreed that the services consider the contents of their report and that learning points are taken into consideration when delivering future projects. My understanding was not...
I'm going to interrupt you here, Councillor Scobie, because these minutes have already been approved at full council and you should have raised any concerns at that meeting. So this is just for noting. Thank you. Good. So we could move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is the internal audit reports, which we have on a separate set of papers. And we've got Mr. Geraghty here to take us through these reports. And I think we'll start with the first one, which is the internal audit report on main financial systems for 2016-17 to do with the pensions administration. Geraghty, anything you want to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. We've got 9 reports before the committee this occasion, so I've dragooned my colleague, Mr. Fox, into the process of speaking to them. So we're splitting the reports. I'll speak to some, he'll speak to some, if that's okay. So Richard will actually take questions on pensions admin, if there are any from the committee.
Ms. Fox, do you have anything to add to the report?
I have nothing to add, Chair.
I noticed that the conclusions were that we had good systems in place. This is at item 5 on page 5, and which are well managed and controlled. And so I think that's a good conclusion. And if we're doing that, that's okay. I don't know if members have anything they want to bring out. I was wondering about iTrent. There's a mention about that needing to be completed. Is that? That's at 6.3. Is that what the iTrent are doing in that part? I see it 4.22 that iTrent will be used in future, but I wonder if we've got it in place yet.
Yes, Chair. 422 is about overpayments as a result of a death of pensioner. And there was an error there that had been picked up as a result of the audit. So part of the mechanism that's been agreed to fix that is to use iTrent to do the calculation for the recovery, because there was a mistake made in the amount of money that was due to be recovered as a result of the death of pensioner. So yes, iTrent's being used to do that. That was agreed. Apologies. 6.3 is about an NFI case. There is a paper later on the agenda about the National Fraud Initiative, where you'll perhaps have an opportunity to explore that a bit better. But the NFI is an exercise where data matching is done, and as a result of a data matching exercise, a pension of fraud was identified. At the time of this audit, October 16, that was the position we'd arrived at, that that we're going to pursue that. We have previously had the largest single fraud in 20-odd years at the council. Previously was connected with a pensioner who had died. Very unfortunately, a relative of his continued to draw the pension for a number of years. and the accumulated value of the fraud was £36,000. So that was picked up in a previous NFI exercise a number of years ago, maybe 8-10 years ago. That was pursued all the way through to the court. The person involved was prosecuted, and they actually had to sell their house to repay the debt. It was most unfortunate, but that's the problem. So here we have perhaps the indications are there's another similar thing, fortunately a much lower value, but that will be pursued, and if appropriate, it'll be through to prosecution.
Mr. Carruthers?
Thanks very much, Chair. Just, I suppose this is my first time here as a member of this committee, so just to try and get an understanding of what type of questions I should be asking. So just from the first point, I think, pardon? It's first, probably the last as well. I think with the new council, if it's the last meeting going up to before the next election. But what I picked up on just reading this first report was more around about the admitted bodies, and there seems to be a pressure there, a stress, and there's bonds missing and things like that. I mean, I thought, didn't really pick up on the real risk. It's not contained within recommendations, but when I was reading it, just as an everyday person, I thought, well, that probably is a risk, because if the police and the fire services aren't actually contributing what they should be, adhering to the proper protocols and processes that are in place, then that would clearly have a risk for the pension fund in particular. Just wonder if I'm correct in saying that, is that kind of the right thing to be raising?
That's a very valid question to raise. The issue with particularly the bond missing, that bond is now in place, I understand, speaking to pensions yesterday. It will expire at the end of next month, and there'll be another one put in place after that. The issue with police and fire service pensions, speaking to Isla yesterday, there's actually no council in Scotland has got an agreement in place at this stage. So that's something being addressed at a national level.
I mean, again, just try to understand these reports. I take it just for noting and try to inquire. So should we strike them from the pensions? Is that something that we have the power to do? Should we take them out of the pension, or is it in statute that they have to remain in? Or there would be accrued interest, so on and so forth, I would imagine. So what's the processes for taking care of that type of business?
In the case of police and fire, they're scheduled bodies, so they have an automatic right to be in the pension fund. In the case for a private body, it is possible, if they don't comply with bonds and things, to strike them out of the pension scheme. But that's not been necessary on this occasion.
I just don't know. It's information. It's good the way of picking up this information, gathering it. The extra financial stress, there'll be accrued interest, so on and so forth. Would that be something they would look to pursue?
We're actually getting the money from police and fire. The question at hand is, are we getting the right amount of money? Because they're not passing on to us the information about who's in. So in effect, they're an employer who's a member of our scheme. They make deductions from their employees and pass them over to the council. So all we're getting from them at the moment is an amount of money. What we're not getting is who are these people, and we would maybe look at their liabilities or how much is due to be recovered from them and how much the employer is also due to contribute. Now, because we haven't got that information, in effect, we're not able to check their contributions. So at the moment, we're going on the basis of the correct contributions are being received. But if that turned out to be incorrect, there would probably be significant row about it. And there would have to be, there'd be negotiations in terms of adjustments and so on for it. But, the pension fund, it's important the pension fund receives the right amount of money, faces all these liabilities, and it makes investments in order to cover those liabilities in the future. So it is really important. Contributions is not something you can kind of just, we'll leave it. It's not something you can waive or delay. Contributions should be received at the right time if the pension fund is going to maintain its integrity. So it is an issue, but it appears to be an issue across the whole of Scotland, which is quite annoying. But it is partly to do with the centralisation of these bodies now, and the mechanism is in place at the moment. But it's something, as Richard said, is being dealt with at a national level. It will be being run up through in ministers in due course, I would imagine.
Councillor Scobie?
All my questions are all right this time, Chair. Just on page 3, and it's pension payments. And it's with reference to the recent findings or decision of I believe, the Court of Session in England in terms of people who are either civil partners or cohabitees or whatever, and the partner has died that have paid into the pension, teacher's pension, for instance. whether indeed we have taken into consideration, if there are any that would be affected in our region, should the Court of Session ruling be used as a benchmark now for future claims against the pension fund, and if there is any that's recognised within Dumfries and Galloway.
Chair, yes. I mean, I'm relieved. I caught a little bit on the news programme because I wouldn't have known what you were talking about otherwise. I had understood it was Northern Ireland. I could have misunderstood, but my understanding was it was a Northern Ireland court ruling, and the court ruling related to somebody who had been, I think, in a local government pension, but maybe possibly civil service pension. It was in a civil partnership. They had died. They had not elected. Everybody that's in the pension fund is sent a form to elect who to receive their benefits from the pension fund in the event of their death. And this person had not completed an election form, which if they'd done so to their partner would have received the money without question. So because there was a question about, the state and all that, the administering body was extremely reluctant to hand over a pension, and in effect it was a bit of a test case. I don't actually think that the administering body didn't want to pay it. They just wanted clarification in law. And it was a very useful and helpful clarification in law that in the particular circumstances of this case, the administering authority was entitled and could not be challenged if it made a pension, what we used to call a widow's pension, to the civil partner. I mean, we've not had that in Scotland, so far as I know. And again, this authority, I'm well aware that this authority, as an administering authority, makes every effort to find a destination for benefits out of the pension scheme in the sad event of a death. So, yes, but I can't assess whether there's likely to be now a wave of claims and so on. It doesn't strike me as being terribly likely. So I think the administering authority was kind of caught on a hook about this, and they just weren't confident in law whether they could legitimately make payments, which is why the case was run. So I suspect the case was actually run with their full agreement and indeed enthusiasm, because they wanted clarification of the position.
Grateful for it, and it was Northern Ireland that you mentioned in the case. Was reported in national news. I do know of one in Dumfries and Galloway, but it's with an English authority, where there is one that the partner has not received, because again, as Kevin has outlined, they did not elect before death, and it's being withheld on that basis, but not with this authority. It's an authority, and it was a teaching profession.
Good. In that case, can we now move on to the second of our internal reports, which is the procurement and purchase compliant. And have we got Karen Scott here today? Yes. Who is our hard-working procurement officer. So welcome. And I wonder if you would like to take us through any points of this report that you'd like to bring to our attention.
Thank you. As Kevin mentioned earlier, obviously this report was prepared in October, so there has been some progress continuing since the preparation of the report. Most recently, in relation to the food stuff, we've actually just undertaken a full review of all the catering within the council, working very closely with colleagues in Enterprise and Services. So we're at the final stages, and over the next week or two, we will actually be signing off on a new strategy as to how we procure those catering food stuffs across the council. So we're just engaging with some of the education establishments just to get full buy-in on that. And that should address all of the issues that have been highlighted within the audit that was undertaken. Likewise, we're going through a similar exercise at the moment in relation to the trade materials and also in the signage, but as yet we've not concluded the actual strategy itself. With the agency staff, we've started having discussions with the suppliers who are actually on the national arrangements. A lot of the first ranked ones don't have a presence within the region at the moment, and so that's one of the things that we're very keen that we actually explore fully with them before we look at how we could migrate across to the national arrangements. So that's something at the moment. I've got a further discussion with them next week. The agency that's first ranked is an agency called Pertemps, So they're looking at how they could actually build up a presence within the region to make sure that we've got capacity and we've got local offices for the actual employees themselves to be going through. So we're keen that we get that in place whilst we still look at the existing arrangements and the terms and conditions attached to those and what the cost could be if we're trying to migrate across the national arrangements, what would be the cost implications. So we're just working through that at the moment in the agency staff.
Thank you. I'm just looking to do with the agency staff situation and enterprising D&G, who just seem to be, don't seem to be sort of going the procurement way that is set out. If you're looking at 4.11 down to 12 and 13, and I just wondered what you're going to do about that, because I was wondering if I have concerns about this, and I'm just wondering if we should be alerting the subcommittee or the director that there is the audit has thrown up a problem within Enterprise and D&G this particular thing. But I would like to know what you are proposing to do.
Enterprise and DG is one of the first areas that have actually had a discussion on this report around in October, November time. So we've actually looked to see where the majority of the need is coming from as well. And so we're working with colleagues in HR to actually look at where we can reduce the need and the reliance on agency staff as well, and using existing capacity within our own workforce before the ongoing needs for agency staff. We're also looking at the maximising workforce attendance policy. So HR are supporting Enterprise and DG in those efforts to try and reduce the overall needs. Enterprise and DG are also preparing at the moment a report of all the terms and conditions that have been agreed with their existing agencies that they have been using, and they're one of the services that I've spoken already about, actually how we can transfer over to the national arrangements. So they're in the middle of compiling a list of actually the roles that are being used and the individuals that are being used at the moment, so we can have those discussions with individuals themselves as well.
But what seems to be one of the problems here was that Enterprise and D&G were, it says here in 4.11, were using the second ranked provider and not the first ranked, and they were using driver hire who were not listed on the framework at all. What are you doing about them complying with the procurement system that we should have in place for that?
Part of that, I think they have been using the second rank, but I'm not convinced that that's necessarily been through a deliberate decision to use the framework. I think it's been they've been using that supplier pre the implementation of the framework, which then has given us a partly compliant route, albeit we're not appropriately using the framework agreement. However, we have signed up to terms and conditions with driver hire, and the individuals themselves have done as well. So we acknowledge within the report that this is not the compliant route to using the framework agreement, and we are likely to be working with pair temps to try and transfer the individuals across to the pair temps, which would move us to the first ranked supplier as opposed to continuing with driver hire.
Yeah, Chair, I don't know if the internal auditors would be in the position or would want to comment. It's really looking at the facility services and again Enterprise and D&G in terms of spot purchase of foodstuff. And there's reference to fresh butcher meat, spot purchase to approximately 15,000 per annum. And then there's reference again to, or reference in here to meal services uses frozen butcher meat, and that will be across the whole of Dumfries and Galloway, I would presume. And again, in bakery items, that these items are in line with current legislation regarding packaging and labelling in terms of the spot purchase, and again to dairy items. Within that, in terms of, and there's whether you would want to comment or indeed can, in comparison to the frozen food against the spot purchase, given that it appears spot purchase is quite within the legitimacy of the procurement rules, whether indeed we should be promoting positive discrimination in terms of the local butcher, baker, candlestick maker, in that sense, to competing against where we're buying and bringing in I presume externally, in terms of frozen foods. Given that we can do it in spot purchase, is there a comparison to be made in terms of the local butcher, baker competing against that? Whether that's been examined?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, it's the opening to potentially a very interesting and unfortunately lengthy discussion. So I'll try and keep my observations short. The bits about the food in this report were follow-ups. Okay, so bear in mind we had previously done a report on compliance with contracting, and we found deficiencies. So this report has got two bits to it. The first bit of it is a follow-up on some of the earlier work, and then some new stuff. The new stuff is around agency staff. The food stuff and the trade materials relates to what we'd previously reported on before. Now, it's difficult to sort of. There was not enough here, shall we say, for me really to stamp my foot over food purchasing, because what we're looking at here is food purchasing principally in connection with the event and hospitality service, which is a trading activity within DG First. So what they're doing is they are offering catering services for events and other, some of them hosted by the council, some of them hosted by other organisations. And their business model is to try and buy local provenance food. And they also want quality food, because what they find is that people that hire them to cater for events or for hospitality are looking for a quality product. And often that's kind of branded. So you know the sorts of things I'm talking about without mentioning any company names, but they will try and use local and branded things. And they make that visible as part of the catering that they're doing. They leave little packets of stuff out, or they have, that kind of, and that seems to be what their clients prefer. And that's understood and appreciated. The difficulty for procurement is that what you should be doing is identifying if you have a need and finding a mechanism and a contract for delivering that need. And what we have here is spot purchasing, which basically means they're buying it as and when they need it from perhaps different suppliers or perhaps the same supplier. And there's no real structure to that purchase other than they phone them up and say, can you deliver me a leg of lamb or a this or a that sort of thing? Okay, now, so it's difficult. We don't want to close down or suppress the events and hospitality service, because if we put too many rules in place, it'll be very difficult. But people forget this is the council, and there are expectations on the council in terms of the way it does things, and there are certain demands and requirements. And it's a vulnerable area, but it's a relatively small area. And that's the message to take away from this. So yes, so Karen's team are fully cognizant with what the ambitions of DG First are in terms of this local branding, local supply, that kind of thing. And they're trying to find the mechanism by which food can be bought under a structured arrangement in connection with a contract, with fair competition having been offered, but also try and address this desire to have sort of, I think they call it naturally DG, this attempt to promote local supplies and local services. Now that's for something that's relatively small. Doing that at a bigger level, a much bigger level, we're also trying as a council to use local suppliers to grow the local economy. These things are very important to the council, and they're very important to us as employees of the council. Some of that is quite challenging sometimes to do that, because you reach a point at which really the only choice you've got to do is to package it up through a formal procurement process and put it out through a formal procurement process, and hope that we've assisted local businesses sufficiently well that they can genuinely compete for that work. That's what we're trying to do. So at a very small and sort of local level, there's a little bit of flexibility, but even so, we have to point out as auditors that what's going on at the moment, or what had been going on, wasn't sufficiently robust. And Karen's team is working with them very carefully to try and develop something that's better than what we've got, but doesn't sort of shut them down. It doesn't bureaucratize it. It doesn't cloak them, choke them. And that's what it's about. So yes, spot purchasing is available, but remember, each decision is each person working for the council is not a procurement officer. I don't claim to have any specialism in procurement or any proper understanding of it. So why people out there think they become procurement experts overnight, I don't know. But it's a lot of training and a lot of care and a lot of understanding. And not everybody can purchase everything they want when they want. We have to put some discipline in.
Councillor Wood?
Thank you, Chair. I must say I was actually delighted that you raised the point about agency costs, because that was a big concern to myself. And I am worried about procurement of this council and the lack of input that we as elected members have within the whole process. And if we look at page 6, number 7, where it talks about a programme of improvement for procurement will address the issues in due course, that's not really very reassuring for myself as an elected member, because there's no detail, there's not evidencing how they're going to go about ensuring that there's going to be a robust system to make sure that we don't have any further problems in the future. So how do we address that elected members get that reassurance?
Chair, can I come in on it just briefly? Yes, that's an important point. The starter in any attempt to buy stuff in a structured way is to understand the need and the requirement. And for something like agency staff, it does vary. So one year we might have a lot more requirements than another year. So the first thing I think is coming to understanding, getting departments to tell centre what their needs are, what their likely requirements are, and so on. That's an exercise and a half on its own. But that is what Karen's team are working on in terms of identifying the requirement. You know, we can look back and say, okay, you spent this money with them, but it isn't necessarily going to be the same amount of money year after year. It comes and goes a bit. So the first stage is identifying what the requirement is and getting departments to buy in to a centrally organised process. After that, this is, you know, that's what Karen's team are working on, and they're experts at this, and they will design a procurement which delivers what we need. That's their job. That's why they're so good at this. That's why I can't do it. I can say I need a temp today, but I can't say what the requirements are going to be across the council and what the best mechanism is for securing that on an ongoing basis. That's why we have procurement specialists. I'll hand to Karen in case you want.
Councillor Wood, want to come back on that?
Mine. It's just one of the ones that really struck me was the likes of Minerva, where you're talking $500,000 over the last 5 or 6 years. Now, I was led to believe this council did its own in-house training, and yet we're bringing in these agencies on a long-term basis, not short-term. And I don't understand why we're not doing homegrown tutors within our own council. I accept that occasionally for specialist skills or whatever, you have to join an agency, but this was a regular contract. And I just have difficulty getting my head around that one.
Yes, Minerva. I mean, I was a bit mean in putting, we spent £500,000 with Minerva over 4 years. That's in there deliberately. It's got the reaction I wanted, which is to point out to people, you've been spending an awful lot of money with this firm. It's a local business. It was well established. They were providing both training services and staff. So it's not that, the spending with Minerva is not limited to training, although training, I think, is kind of what they started out trying to do, but they were also providing staff. So it was a bit mean of me to say, oh, I spent £500,000 with them. But people seem to forget that, you know, actually the build-up can happen quite quickly over several years. You can wind up spending quite a lot of money. There should have been a structure in place for that. But again, there was lots of individuals had requirements that they dealt with by going to Minerva. And there was genuine impression in the council that Minerva was the appointed contractor. You're going, well, where's the contract for it? Who organised the contract? Where does it say all this? And the answer was, no, there isn't anything in place. We just use Minerva. So unfortunate, a local business went down. They were quite tight, I think. You know, they didn't have a lot of margin. You kind of begin to wonder, was the council therefore not paying them enough to be able to keep the business surviving, all that sort of stuff. But they were very important to the council, and it caused a big dislocation when they went down. We had lots of staff working for the council at that time who were with Minerva, who suddenly didn't have an employer. And in effect, we had to send all those people home and try and get them back again through another mechanism. So the disruption to our business was important. And it's a kind of creep thing had happened. So again, this is part of people need to stop and think in terms of what are my requirements, what are they likely to be for the future, should there be a centrally organised procurement mechanism for this? And that's what we need. We need more order, more structure, more mechanisms.
Councillor Crothers?
Thanks, Chair. I think, again, when I read this, just as a new person to the committee, I suppose I cast my mind back to Scrutiny and Performance Committee, and we looked at this in great detail. And I think I attended 7 local authorities throughout Scotland, sorry. And one of the interesting things that came from it, and Andrew's probably highlighted in regards to it, the procurement departments in local authorities that are really successful take it seriously and have its own procurement committee. And I think so the members of the council have clear oversight over that. And remember, I think it went to full council, put that forward as a proposal at that time, but unfortunately it fell. I felt very much this is what this lacks. Again, when I seen as much, it's almost like when I read it again, just from a simple point of view, it seemed like clear breaches in protocols and policies that the council has made. So therefore, I think, well, I wonder how this is being managed. Does this go as far as disciplinary, or do the council, through the scheme of delegation, just look at this and think, oh well, we'll just deal with it and keep it going and try and move it as best we can? Because if it was a private company, I'm quite sure that disciplinary action would have took place with as many breaches. I don't know if it's the whole picture or just a small snapshot of the Dumfries and Galloway Council and how it works. But that was my thoughts when I looked at it. I thought the council should be taking this very, very seriously, procurement. There's a lot of savings and benefits for the local economy when it comes to procurement. They should have their own committee. That's certainly not within the recommendations here, obviously. And I've just been reading on behind the front page, the front is what our remit is, and I don't know where to see what we could actually, how audit and risk actually affects that or changes it, other than we see it, we know it, and understand that this is a set of circumstances that has happened at a point in time in the council where we've seen it, we've recognised it, and it'll go into some kind of risk management process later on, or it might even be partway through that now. But that was certainly my views. With looking at it, there were so many breaches, I thought, what on earth is the council doing about this? We really need to get a hang of it, and the right way to do that is put forward a procurement committee that has a complete overlook through the members themselves.
Thank you. I don't know whether other members will feel the same, but I think with quite a lot of these that we do need to send this report or a letter to Enterprise and D&G to raise the concerns that have been brought forward. I know this was done in 3-4 months ago, and Karen has said that you are putting things in place, but nevertheless, it's in front of us today, and I think we have to take notice of the lapses of actually. What it says here, that managers we contacted were unaware that a national contract was in place and should have been used. Just fundamental things like that. We need to know that they are being dealt with in the various departments that are using procurement for these things, particularly Enterprise and D&G, I would have to suggest. But that's my view. We'll maybe come to that at the end of this, when everybody's had to say. I've got Councillor Bell and Councillor Scobie and then Councillor McKee.
Thank you, Chair. Just what Councillor Scobie mentioned a few minutes ago, we're talking about food purchase and meat purchase and supporting local suppliers and local economy. One thing I want to be quite clear to the members of this committee is the meat we're purchasing, is it farm assured, quality assured, is it traceability going back to the farm? It's quite important because a lot of Argentinian beef and Bolivian beef comes in this country and repackaged, and we don't know where it's coming from. And it does concern me we're getting we could be buying substandard meat. So can you clarify to the members here, it's farm assured, it's traceability, we can trace it back to the origin where the meat has come from?
Yep, that is in place, and that's part of the specifications, be that either through a local contractor spot purchase that's been put in place, or where we are purchasing meat through the national contracts. The traceability and the origin is part of the specifications of what we require, and ensuring that we actually get UK meat, because there has been occasions in the past where that has not happened, and those issues have been escalated as well within the national agencies to ensure that those sort of circumstances don't occur again.
Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, it's returning to the agency staff and recognising the good work of Kevin and his team in terms of looking at that, matched against the understanding of procurement rules, where things can slip below the radar. And when I look at 4.8, where we're spending 1.056 million, and it talks about in 410 temporary and interim staff services. My understanding of it is that we have agency workers who've been working with the council for 2 and 3 and more years in the same job. You know, so I wonder in terms of the structure, regulation, comparing some of these costs, you know, of over £1 million, whether indeed it's best value for the council, whether that's been looked at in terms of direct employees against agency workers. And there tends to be a two-tier employment being created, that full-time workers, you know, and I just use this as an example, not being offered overtime or whatever, because that's going to the agency workers and so forth. So there may be bad practices or irregular practices out there in terms of how departments are looking at this whole idea of engaging agency workers. And we as elected members are not really getting the full picture or the real nuts and bolts of this whole agency working arrangement. And there is no, unless Kevin or Carl can go back and say, yes, there is regulation, there is structure to it. And that's been set by the members.
I absolutely agree. I mean, we can all understand when you need to use agency workers in an emergency situation when there's staff off and you need to drive snowplows or pick up rubbish or whatever it is. But you know, long-term agency staff is not a terribly clever way forward. So, how would you be dealing with that, then, Karen?
This is one of the things as part of the review that we're undertaking on the back of this report, is to actually find out who are these individuals, what are they doing, how long have they been in place, and then what's the cost as well. There's finder's fees and things attached as well. What's the cost in that? But that's why we've engaged with HR as well. So it's myself and HR that are both looking at this jointly to actually identify what is the best route. So it's not a case of just actually which supplier should we be using, which national arrangement should we be using, but actually what type of person should we be using? Should it be our own employees? Should it be going out? And again, where we have got a recurring need as well. So we're using an example there, Chair, of snowplows or waste operatives, where we actually notice a trend that there's an ongoing need every Monday for waste operatives, then actually can we have some other mechanism instead of an agency staff if we can identify trends as well. So that's part of the exercise that we're going through at the moment, to identify where those trends are and how long people have been in post, and actually should it be, there's some new HMRC guidance as well that's just came out that we're trying to work through at the moment as well, to actually understand at which point they actually just become a council employee and what the implications are of that, and looking more broadly at that in terms of use of consultants as well.
And where, just if you don't mind, and where would that report come to when you've done it, so that we can see that, you know, that you've got a recommendation that we do it in a different way, or that it is being done in a different way? I mean, how do we monitor what's been happening?
My intention that this will form part of the quarterly procurement updates that are going to the Policy and Resources Committee. So for all the kind of key high value complex spends, we'll be identifying what our priorities are at the start of the year, and then a progress update given on a quarterly basis as to how we're progressing with those, going through the P&R committee, because I understand the procurement subcommittee was the option not taken forward, but the reason for that was that Policy and Resources Committee would be used as that avenue. So the intent is that will be provided on a quarterly basis to that committee.
To agree with Councillor Crothers, I think if we had a procurement committee, we would be dealing with this much more direct. But we are where we are at the moment. But that's good that it will be going there for the time being. Councillor McKee.
I think I'm starting to get a degree of comfort for this young lady here, that they're starting to look at the procurement issue, because you read through here and it makes you wonder what's happening. How long would these temporary staff, what's the maximum length of time they can be retained for? Is it a case of after a certain length of time they've got to become permanent? And these sorts of things are quite concerning. But no, I've got concerns about the whole of this audit, the things it's raising. It makes you wonder just what's going on. Is everything going on above board? But you seem to have things in hand. So if we're back after the election, we'll maybe see how you're developing.
Right, so I think we've had a good discussion on this one, but it was important because there were some big issues that are not. I don't know whether you feel that we should communicate with Enterprising D&G and just raise our concerns with regards particularly from 4.11, the contracting, and how they're doing that. Yes, I just think we ought. I think as a committee we ought to we have got concerns because we've discussed it, and I think we ought to be sending that to somewhere else. And I don't know whether it's Enterprise and D&G scrutiny or I don't know that it is full council. Do you think? Policy and resources and procurement. I'll just let Kevin in if you don't mind.
Sorry, Chair. At the risk of perhaps being slightly controversial, don't forget that you influence the governance statement. And if you have a concern, I think, of this nature and of this level, then you should be looking to see something in the governance statement, which is, in effect, your communication to the rest of the council about the council's position. And the governance statement would be, the draft governance statement will come to you in June, and it will be a new committee, but many of you hopefully will be back. But there's no reason for you not at this stage to say you expect to see something referenced in the governance statement around the general concerns that have been emerging on procurement, not just at this committee. We've had discussions on procurement and procurement-related issues going back probably 15 months, 18 months or so. So I think, advising you professionally, at certain risks to myself, my professional advice to you would be to say, ask to have something included in the governance statement. Because the governance statement, remember, is a self-analysis. It's meant to be a fair and open self-analysis by the council of its position in relation to governance issues. And if you have a concern, you're the watchful committee. If you have this concern, then I would really hope that you would seek to have it included in the governance statement. And that, to me, at this stage, for the general issue about procurement, procurement generally, there may be specific referral to a subcommittee or an alternative committee you want to make, but for the general issues around procurement, I think it's in the governance statement that you should be looking to express that.
Scobie?
Yeah, and I think Kevin's answered the question or the position I was going to put, because I've been asking the questions in terms of DG Enterprise at the enterprising subcommittee on agency arrangements and everything. So I think to what Kevin's saying, I think we should be putting it into the governance statement. But we should also, notwithstand, that it may go to policy and resources, I think that we should be looking for greater, for it to be further looked into in terms of the agency, so that we can satisfy ourselves that there is structure, that there is regulation, not just with one department of the council, but across the departments, because it's not just one. It could be in social care, it could be in how we employ home carers and so forth and so on. So I think we need structure, and hence my reference that things can slip below the radar if we don't have it in, and we're not covering it, as Kevin says, by a governance statement in that. So we should be looking for reports of that nature coming here. To Jock's question, I know of agency workers that have been employed for 2-3 years, and they don't automatically transfer, and when anything comes up, well, it's third-party arrangement, but yet the council could be cited should anything happen.
Thanks, Chair. I forgot about this. We've had so many changes at the top that a lot of the expertise has gone. And I think where we're slipping up, we're not training the people that are still there. On 419 on page 5, the managers we contacted were unaware that a national contract was in place, but should have been used. And that's got to be a big concern for us. These people should know these things. If they're just promoted into post, that should be part of their training, I would have thought. So that's they're leaving them. They're maybe following everything by the detail, but they're leaving themselves open to kind of charge of doing the wrong thing.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose more in general terms, what I was trying to pick up on was, I agree with what's being said in regards to a compliance with particular types of procurement. You could say whether it's drivers or social or care assistants, so on and so forth. But the point I was trying to emphasise, Chair, was it looks to me from reading this report we're in clear breach of our standing orders. Standing orders. I may be wrong. I just don't know. That's how I read it. That we've got procurement standing orders, and they're not being adhered to. And that's why I spoke maybe as strongly as what I did really about the disciplinary side. I've recently had a personal experience with a constituent dealing with the council and so on and so forth, and ultimately it was down to the lack of experience from the personnel within the council staff themselves, and that was no fault of hers. And it goes back to, I don't think we've got a strong enough procurement team. We need to beef that up, and the council needs to take a stronger overlook. So the governance statement, I just wonder how would that cover, how would that be described? What would be the language in there to say that, listen, this is a real, because I think it is a governance issue. Because if standing orders aren't being adhered to, if I'm correct in my reading of this, then that is definitely a governance issue. And what cognizance does the council then take of that? What's the process for that? Just so I know what decision we're making today and how we'll follow that, because going back to our delegated authority, looking in the back of our front page, you're just totally clear on that, Chair.
Brennan?
No, I think the points that have been made are good ones. Firstly, just going back a step about the procurement committee. Obviously, that's a matter for the new council, and when we are discussing the committee structure with the new council, I'm sure that issue will come up about how procurement, where it sits in terms of committee delegations and responsibilities. The question of a disciplinary is obviously always a difficult one. Yes, in governance terms, people should be complying with standing orders, and we probably have a job to do to make sure that people understand that. But also, before we take any action against people, I think we've got to make sure they have got the information and they have had the training. And with Karen's help, I'm sure we'll get into a position where we can hand on heart and say that no one should have any excuse for not following them. We've done everything that we can to ensure that. So I think at that stage it becomes something that we would be taking into account.
I think for this committee at this moment in time, we would ask that in our government statement we have, and so I think we need to have that minuted. But Claire, I think we've all agreed that we need to keep this awareness. Happy with that, members? I just realised, call it lack of expertise. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and that the recording will subsequently be available for public listening, just in case I get caught out, okay? Sorry about that. Sorry. just keeps me right, okay? Good. So we go on to the third one, which is the main financial systems 2016-17 payables central creditors. I thought this read as a very good report, and I personally have no questions about it because there was lots of positive things forward. I don't know if any members want to ask any questions. Councillor Carruthers?
Just come back to the statement that I've just made in regards to my personal experience locally with a constituent in the council and the payment methods. Again, it just comes back to that lack of training. And I think the council corporately has a responsibility to put that in place. Other than that, I felt it read well.
The next one is the LEADER programme. And again, I don't have any questions on this. I don't know if members have any questions they want to bring up on this one. Councillor Scobie?
Just a point to be made again, and it's really to see that we are sweating the asset, that we're making maximum, whether it's Brexit in or out or wherever we are with it. But it's and 1.4 does indicate we're dealing from Annan to Stranraer, for Upper Nithsdale to the South Machars, in terms of the examples they're given with it deliberately. They've been designed that way, but are we making maximum use of LEADER programme in terms of sweating that asset so that we are getting maximum benefit before exit or whatever.
Who's dealing with this one? Is that you? Okay.
Chair, there is a very good process in place through a lag to allocate money to particular projects. I'm not aware there's particular acceleration of spending in response to Brexit as it is European money. But certainly there is a good process to ensure that we get the best value from the particular projects in accordance with the criteria being given.
I have no doubt on that one. It's really, you know, from the asset, the monies that are available, that we are, you know, taking maximum benefit from it in terms of project support. Not, you know, I understand and appreciate that it's being properly monitored and best use of monies, but are we, you know, maximising the monies that are available? So be it, you know, it needs joint funding. You know, I don't want to give an example, but, you know, it's, I'm sure the council, in my opinion, could do a great deal better, and there's benefits out there from using it.
Chair, really just as an aside, so forgive me. The LEADER programme invites applications. It's an application-based award. So somebody needs to apply with a project. The project has to meet certain criteria in order to attract funding, and then the group meets and awards as appropriate. And part of that is co-funding, alternative funding sources, these sorts of things. There are rounds done. So there are subgroups within LEADER or within the LAG. You know, that it's not a single body meeting to make all the decisions. There are subgroups in that, and there are rounds, and there's good advertising done, and there is also the responsibility on the council generally to try and support. That's the development side of things, to try and to take projects or you know, ideas and turn them into projects, which then could be submitted for funding. So there is activity in that area. I don't have a lot of detail on that, but we're aware as auditors of this, is that there's some pre-work being done in terms of trying to bring project forwards, because the last thing the council wants to do is not get maximum use of this money and maximum drawdown of it. It's very important funding to the council. It's been really good over a number of years. We've had a number of LEADER rounds, and overall we're regarded as successful in terms of bringing forward projects and supporting projects and delivering projects, not us, but the, you know, the bodies concerned. But I think our council is regarded well in terms of supporting the drawdown of LEADER funding, and this money's been important to the region.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. It's 5.4.3 on page 3, where they're talking about, once again, it's a silly mistake of an invoice not being dated. Now, the repercussions of that, just how severe could they be if you know, it's not allowed? I mean, apart from the clawback, will there be penalties applied? And if they are, what sort of penalties get applied?
I spoke to the team this morning, and I understand the Scottish Government aren't seeking to recover this particular invoice to be done. I don't think there will be any provision for penalties if the issue with this particular invoice is that there was a concern that the work might have been done before the start of the project, and therefore it might be disallowed. I don't think there's any penalties associated with that, apart from the fact that they wouldn't actually get that funding. But we understand that the Scottish Government aren't following that route on this occasion.
Who's going to pay for it then? It'll be landed in our lap, is it?
Thank you. We'll then go on to the next internal one, which is Departmental Business Systems 2016-17 tendering of building work. I have to say, on a personal note, this does not make very happy reading, except for the last one. It seems to me that when we get a professional body in, the tendering system is done correctly, and when we don't, it's not. But that's just a very brief overview. Councillor Prentice.
There we go. Forgotten what I was going to say now. No, I think, Chair, I agree with you. I mean, the one about the Rye is okay. It's the other two which are particularly worrying, some of the aspects in there. I think, for me, and maybe Kevin could give us his side on it, but for me, the worst one is on page 420, you know, in aspect of the first tenderer withdrawing and being allowed to withdraw, and we suddenly have two legal tenders for the same job. That's my reading of the situation, which is really, it's not really very acceptable, that, I don't think. Anyway, I don't know what Kevin thinks.
I think I absolutely agree with you. I think the first two are bad. The third one is good because actually the process was good. I mean, the cost was up, but that's what happens with tendering. You know, things come in. But the actual process worked, and that's what we seem to be lacking with the first one and the second one within this report, that the process didn't seem to be followed, and as a result, mistakes were made and errors occurred. So, are you dealing with this one, or is Karen dealing with this, or is Fox?
I'll take this one, Chair.
Okay.
Yes, the context for this is we had previously done a tendering review. We hadn't found very many problems. There was a technical issue which led to a recommendation to have procurement standing orders updated. And you asked us as a committee to do another one. I think you had broader concerns about tendering and generally than had appeared in the work that we'd done. So although we were giving you, it's an amber light at least, you expressed broader and more general concerns and asked us to redo this. So we redid this. We picked 3 projects. In terms of the first one, the actual process for tendering was okay. They invited 4 people to bid. The requirement for procurement standing orders is that 3 quotes be received, but they actually invited 4. They did get 3, but then in effect 1 dropped out, which left them with 2. So in terms of process and our rules and our ability to deal with these sorts of situations, some questions have arisen around that, which have been in discussion with Karen about. Procurement standing orders are currently in the process of being updated. They will be coming to committee. They'll be coming to the council in March, and I think that will clarify a great many things. I think it will provide a stronger direction of travel on a number of issues, including some of the sort of more technical issues of this. So the bridge one was unfortunate because we wound up in effect we had 3 tenders. The first tender withdrew. The withdrawal wasn't handled properly in the sense of we didn't issue a contract termination letter. So for a short period of time, at least, we had 2 contractors appointed for the same job, which was just silly, really. It's a risk exposure we didn't need. The first contract was never going to do the work. That was the point. Once they'd realised they'd made mistakes in their tender, they wanted to run away from this. So they were never going to press their case with the council that we had appointed them. So it's a technicality that there were 2 contractors appointed, but nevertheless, it's not a situation you want to be in, really. It's unfortunate that the second tender that was submitted was quite a lot more than the cheapest tender, which in turn was quite a lot more than we'd thought it was going to cost us. So we wound up with quite a big expense on this bridge. We've thought about that quite a lot in terms of trying to understand what happened. A lot of it's to do with when you go to market, the capacity within the market. It was a summer painting job. It was a summer external painting job. That is when peak demand. So in some senses, we wanted ours done at the same time, but that's when the contractors are at their most busy and they have to hire extra men in and extra requirements and so on, an extra plant to be able to deliver a job like this. And it was a complex job. And, you could raise the question, was that properly understood when we put the tender together? We specified the work that was required. We specified all the needs, for covering the bridge with specialised scaffolding in sections and all that sort of stuff, and covering the scaffolding over with plastic, what's called encapsulation. But in terms of perhaps we didn't understand it in terms of our pre-tender estimating process. So you can argue we underestimated how much it was going to cost. The other bits of the job were okay. That one was okay. The third one was unfortunate. It was of an emergency nature. We had an estimate for the job that we thought was going to be right. The tender came in about half as much again. And then we had some additional costs on top because there was a chimney needed to be relined to be able to use it as a flue for the boiler, and that had not been in the original estimate. But the process, the tendering process there was tight as a button. It was really, really good. It's the best example we've got of the tendering. The middle one, I think we've got a problem in terms of building services and their approach to what we ask of them as a council. And they are not compliant with procurement standing orders, and we need to be doing something about that. So I've been in discussion with the director, and his full support in terms of addressing this and finding a mechanism for the council to have confidence that building services can operate in accordance with procurement standing orders. But there's also this argument that says they need a degree of flexibility because, again, we're heading for trading in this area, and they need some degree of flexibility. So a middle way needs to be found through that. But currently, as I say, I'm very confident I've got the full support of the director in addressing this problem. Karen's been extremely helpful as well in terms of the discussions with her around what the issues are, how we're going to take some of those forward. So there's a lot in that middle one, but it's the least satisfactory, unfortunately, in terms of compliance with procurement standing.
Councillor Wood?
Thanks, Chair. Just seeking clarification. When a contractor puts in a quote and it's accepted by the council, there's a legal binding on that contract. If that contractor then withdraws and you put it out to tender, they are still liable for the difference between what their price was and what you end up paying. What is actually going to happen to the differences that do we have between these two figures?
I don't think that legal position is well understood within the council. And so there is no, at least in some sections, shall we say, and there is no indication of any intent to pursue the first contractor for the difference between the two. And to some extent, that's the problem with that one. The deficiency in their bid was identifiable prior to the point of acceptance. So in other words, we should have sorted that out before we accepted the contract, which would not put the contractor in the position of us then pursuing them. Having accepted their contract, you're probably right that we may have a legal case to go after them for the extra cost that it cost us because they have failed to execute the contract. But we're not going to do that. In effect, we've let the contractor off. I'm not saying we've let them escape free. The contractor genuinely made a mistake. This is a contractor we've worked on similar projects. They've been helpful to the council. They've won some work and they've delivered the work appropriately and well, with no issues with the contractor. I don't know what happened here, whether they misunderstood the tender, whether something went wrong for them. So they mispriced it. But that mispricing was visible before the point of acceptance. And the failure in this first contract is a failure to evaluate the contracts or the tenders appropriately. There's a mechanism where you compare the tenders between themselves and also against your pre-tender estimate. You do what's called an element analysis, which is you look at the different parts of the it's not, but if it's electrical work or builder work or groundwork or whatever, there's elements within a bill of quantities. That should have happened and it didn't happen. So, I think there was a time pressure here. So I suspect they got the tenders in. It was a bit looks. It's more than we thought, but we need to be getting on with this job. So they awarded the contract. And as they started the discussions with the contractor about executing the work, which was about 2 weeks away, maybe 3, that they were meant to be on site, that's the point at which there was a discussion about the scaffolding, and the tenderer went, I haven't allowed for that. And they're going, well, you should have. And he's going, well, I didn't. What do we do? And he came up with a figure for it. So I had some discussion with Karen in terms of, well, should we have allowed the extra or what? And the answer was no. Basically, that amounts to a post-tender negotiation. That's a bit of a no-no. So the only option we had was to insist that the contractor executed the contract, us having accepted it, or we cancelled it. And we didn't do either of those. We just appointed another guy instead. So that hence there's a sort of technical issue in there. But I don't think in this situation the error to me sits in the in the tender evaluation process. That's what fell down. If that had been done properly, we wouldn't have been in the situation of having to appoint a contractor and then not appoint a second contractor. It was very unfortunate, I think.
Goodness, Kevin, what a tale of woe, quite frankly. the tender evaluation process presumably is fundamental to the whole process of getting people to do jobs for us. And Karen, I don't know whether you found a glitch in the process, or was it just that it was done too quickly, but it still should have been flagged up that certain parts of the tender was not in the first quote of this. And if enterprising D&G are hoping to branch out and go elsewhere and seek jobs and things, the fundamental thing they've got to get right is they've got to get a tendering process that works and that they stick to. I mean, we've got one at the end there, which you said was tight as tight could be, and we got a job done, and that was fine. We need to have something there, and we need to alert the management of enterprising D&G that there's fundamental problems here with the tendering process. So I don't know whether you have anything you want to say to it.
I wasn't personally, and my team are not involved directly in that particular one, but we have had similar occasions come up elsewhere within the business whereby we have followed a process where we have identified elements of a bid to be particularly low in comparison to others that have been received in relation to our pre-tender estimate, and we've pursued those before proceeding with the award and reached an agreed point with that contractor that actually we've got confidence ourselves that they're able to deliver before we've actually awarded the contract to avoid situations like this occurring. So that's actually, I've now got that written up as a standard procedure, and there's some template document that's now been made available across the council so that people who are undertaking evaluations within service departments have got that support in place now as well to allow them to do that, but it will require them to take the time to actually identify that during their evaluation process and seek that clarification. In terms of the timescale pressure, it's acknowledged. However, you still need to have that discussion. It's just the time in which you send your award letter out that changes. So the actual time to take the discussion, you're going to need to have it either way. So as part of the training that will be going on for people in terms of new standing orders and new procedures, that will be covered off with them as well.
So, Karen, is that back down to training the managers, which were in the previous two batch, we found that they were not aware of certain things, and is this the same thing with this then, do you think?
Yeah, it's part of it, yes. So the plan in March is to do a full programme of training with officers across the council. Part of that will be on the new standing orders, it'll be on the new abnormally low bid procedure. There'll be a whole range of things and topics being covered, some of the PCOS things as well. There's going to be a range of things that we'll cover under that training. We're also looking at how we communicate with people, where's the training tools, where's our template documents, what are our template documents, how do we tell people what contracts are available. So I'm working at the moment with colleagues in BTS to actually have a kind of central place that all of that's easily accessible. We've depended previously on SharePoint, which I believe is not working effectively, hence the reason we're looking at another means of communication for that. So that's kind of underway at the moment.
Councillor Wood? I've got you down as wanting to speak? No? Oh, no. Well, you don't have to if you don't want to. I've got Councillor Carruthers and Councillor Scobie.
No, it was actually when I was looking at number 5, Irish Street. We purchased that for $500,000, and then we're going and spending over $2 million on it in refurbishment. Was that really good value for the public purse?
Not sure that's entirely what today's all about, to be perfectly honest. I think that's for another day. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just be rehearsing what I said earlier in regards to procurement, so I'll just re-emphasise that without going over it again. But what I really found interesting about this is because I get lobbied quite heavily for local businesses as a member of the council, a local councillor, in regards to the difficulties they have in getting into the tendering process in the first place. And I think that's found through here. I think that there can be difficulties, can be easy, but it means it can be complicated for especially the small businesses. But the ways and means going for them to actually access that. But it brought me in mind of 2 cases in particular that have been brought to me. One was a project that DG Foster carried out, so I just wondered if there's a link here that we can actually tie these in, because I've asked for it on many occasions. I just wonder if this is the right committee to have a look at it. DG Foster carried out a job in the Annan area. It went through the books, 144k. And I did a lot of research in behind. I asked 2 or 3 local companies to say, listen, there's the works, there's the quantities, so on and so forth. And they came up between £60,000 and £80,000 is what they thought, somewhere about there. I actually got all the hard facts for the council. We actually spent just over nearly 77,000 on it. And the bill came through at 144. I asked for where's the discrepancy, what is that? And it was never ever told what that discrepancy was, where that extra 70-odd thousand pound went, disappeared, where it was via to, whatever, I just don't know. There was another one where a local businessman, he approached me, he says, listen, I've just read in the paper that you've spent over £100,000 on a local school. He says, on a particular job. He says, no, I never ever tender for council work. He says, I did in this case because it's the school that I went to, and I feel quite passionate about it as a local businessman. So he tendered it. He says, I put in a competitive tender at £42,000. He says, that was about 9 weeks ago, and I've just read that you've just spent 100 and odd thousand, I think it was 108 or 116,000 at the time. This is straight off the cuff from memory. So I just wondered, is this the right place for us to be looking at that type of thing, this committee? Because I've tried scrutiny, I've tried other committees, and it just seems to fall on its face. But there's clear discrepancies there. They say, look, where on earth, again, I was spending money at best value. So, I mean, just a bit of advice in regards to that. I mean, my statement stands in regards to the previous points I brought up in regards to procurement. I think we need to beef that up. Members need to have a closer oversight. But them two particular cases, and cases like them, because I do have others, is this the right committee that should be looking at that type of, I suppose, failing, as I would see it?
Chair.
I don't think it is. I think that's
Well, yes, running us back, not too far though, the role and purpose of the committee and so on. And previously we've had representations from individual members expressing concerns about particular projects. And in the past, we've kind of avoided taking up that cause. That's the simplest way of describing it. And I think that's right. Now, there are mechanisms available for the councillors' particular concerns. There are two immediate mechanisms available. The first is, and I'll probably annoy you in saying this, but in terms of the EMES system, you can raise a question through EMES and expect an answer. And so with the specifics that you've got, I would have thought you could have put those through EMES and get an answer. If you can't, or if you don't, you can also ask internal audit to look at it. And I don't mean we're available for your individual commissioners members, but this is part of a general concern, okay, a general pattern. And a number of members have come to me with representations, and we've had discussions, and I've done a bit of research around what their remarks have been. So I am available if you have something as specific as this. And if it is a question of what has been the breakdown of that project, that should not be difficult to obtain. If you haven't obtained that information already through direct channels, I'd encourage you to put it through EMES, where you should get a clear and unequivocal answer on it. But if you have a concern or a doubt or a worry about it, I will attempt to assist you with that, okay, without it becoming a Joan of Arc type situation where I'm leading a charge, okay. But generally speaking, broader than that, though, I mean, I think this committee has got a concern about procurement. I hope to goodness you have, because I've been bringing reports over the last 15 months telling you there are problems with it, okay. Equally, we're bringing colleagues to the table who are giving assurances and telling you about forward plans and programs and so on. That's excellent. And Karen's already explained that there is now a mechanism in place for her to report back to committee. This is important. And I hope as members of the committee, you also keep an eye on what's happening, therefore, in connection with this. Because overall, if your overall concern is procurement, it appears to have a number of issues, a number of aspects with it. And if the assurance mechanism is it's being brought back to policy and resources, then you should be making sure that's happening. And if it's not happening, your concern should continue. So, but if you are satisfied by seeing what's happening at policy and resources and seeing the development cycle that's going on there and the assurances that are being given there, you can then be more satisfied and fall back to the, okay, let's have a look at individual projects. So within this, I mean, as a general comment, included in here is a concern currently that building services are not very good at reporting back to contractors on the outcomes of exercises. There's a kind of explanation for that, which is a bit convoluted, so I won't go into it. But the bottom line is the standard that's required is shown in the third mechanism here, where the contractors, the bidders, were all written to with a list of who had submitted bids and what the value of bids were. Not matched, so it wasn't they weren't told what each company had bid, but they were told, here's the value of the tenders that was received in ranked order, and here is the list of people who bid in alphabetical order. And obviously, one firm will know what they bid, so they can immediately connect two of those up, but they'll be able then to see that, okay, here are the bids that were received. That's valuable information. That's valuable, useful source of information to contractors because it helps them understand how to compete, what they might need to do to sharpen their prices. There could be some types of work they're just never going to be competitive on. So that information coming back to tenderers, and in both those cases you've mentioned, sounds to me like neither of those knows what has happened, and that should happen, particularly if they submit a bid. They should be being told what the outcome of that bid is and what the winning price was. So again, it's part of what we're reporting here is there's a deficiency in terms of procedure.
Thanks very much, Chair. If you don't mind, just come back on a couple of points.
I'm very conscious of the time, so you've had a pretty extensive response to your question.
I know, but I think maybe Kevin's picked up what I was saying a little bit was wrong, because one was a private contractor, one was internal, it was DG First. So fair enough with the private contractor, absolutely, it was an external contractor came in and it looked, so I think there's an evaluation process, but the other one was DG First that took on the contract. They actually employed external contractors. I've seen how much it cost, how much they were paid and so on. So I've got all that evidence. It's a 77,000 or so that seems to have disappeared into the ether. And I'll take the process with Kevin's advice. I'll take EMES. I've been through that process. I will do it again. Then I'll come speak to Kevin, obviously, regards to that. But Ricky Hutton was my next port of call. So I'm glad I've received that advice today.
Right, quickly, Councillor Scobie, is that a contradiction? Quickly.
No, but keeping me safe is. I'll give way to you, Chair, on that one in terms of quickness. I think the issue is here contained in item 8 on page 11 in terms of updating the procurement and standing orders. I think we've got to be careful, from your remarks, Chair, that we're not shooting the messenger in this case. We're getting a comprehensive report, and it is a comprehensive report. There are concerns from Audit, and I think that we need to take those concerns on board. And it is, as I see it in the item 8, that we need to be updating the procurement standing orders required. I could give you an example where, from tender to contract to selling of land, we now are in a joint venture. And yet there was a huge, in my opinion, and I will serve an EMS on it, where, from tender to contract to the sale of land to exclusivity periods, we now are in a joint venture. So, in respect, I think we do need to look at the updating, as the auditors are saying, to bring that to a conclusion. Because we only looked at 3 examples. I'm quite sure we could have looked at a number, as has been highlighted today.
Hope it works this time, Chair. Yeah. Just a very quick comment on the Dumfries situation. With that boiler. It's not now to do with Kevin, but everybody and their dog knew that boiler was on the blink. It was the talk of the Glen Kens for, when parents were picking up their children, they would ask somebody else, how's the boiler? The boiler wouldn't be working. Now, maybe if the boiler had been replaced at the time of it constantly breaking down, instead of waiting until it died, it could have been done for less than 85,000 quid.
Good. Well, I just want to know how we want to take this forward. Oh, sorry, 'cause I didn't see you.
Given the issues here, sometimes we're using people that's not on the contract, not on the procurement, do we invite local companies to register?
That's an exercise we're going through at the moment. So actually all the suppliers who are participating in the trades frameworks at the contracts at the moment and being invited, they've just shared a list with me yesterday afternoon, so we're looking to get them all registered onto Public Contract Scotland. We've got an event taking place next week to provide support to ensure we can get everybody registered. And within the updated draft of the standing orders that will be presented in the next month for approval, within the lower value under 50k contracts, where the recommendation going forward will be that you're seeking a minimum of 5 quotations, 3 of which are from local companies, where there's local companies available to deliver the work.
Just with the issues that have been raised in this report. I don't know whether, I mean, it's sort of building services and project engineer, really, which is part of E&I, is it, or is it part of enterprise and D&G?
There'd be a bit of both, but also property services issues as well, I think.
I feel that we need to send something from here to say that this was not done, these things were not done well, that the tender evaluation process was not in place. I'm sure it's becoming in place, but I think we need to deal with what's in front of us today. And, you know, at 5.27, which as regards the building sites, you know, it's pretty damning that, you know, the procedures within building services don't comply with current procurement standing orders. I mean, you know, we have to raise that awareness that that's a thing they have to do.
Chair,
Sorry.
is it not there in item 8? And
Item 8, where
yes, on page 11, in terms of does any further action need to take place, and it's given a direction there. And using these as 3 examples, then to put it to standing orders sub or whatever, to look at these in terms of updating also the procurement standing orders and to bring that to a conclusion on the back of the 3 examples. That would be a way forward,
that would be a
because
way
it covers EEI, it covers property, it covers engineering, it covers but if we have a robust standing order under procurement, then you would imagine all will be covered. And that would, I would hope, would be our conclusion from this one, to put it to look at the procurement standing orders under. We have a subcommittee already looking at standing orders.
From Rona here, what?
I mean, it may be appropriate then simply a letter to a corporate management team about, so then you cover all departments about the need to follow standing orders, and also is a nice introduction into the procurement team's work and their training that they're going to carry out on the new standing orders. So I think if it's I'm happy to help you as chair draft a letter to corporate management team on those terms, and that we can lay the ground for the good work that will follow from Karen's team.
Want them to be implemented, is the truth be known, apart from anything else. You know, we just want to
Yeah, but
use
this
them.
one say, you know, not only because whether standing orders has been followed, but it's quite clearly saying it's updating of standing orders. So I think we've got to be looking at that.
The procurement standing orders are on the agenda for full council at the end of March, and I think Karen's consulting on those standing orders at the moment.
We'll do that to CMP if you do that. That would be good. Financial systems, it's PCOS really, and again I thought this read as a good report. The only thing I have concerns about is at 5.1, which is that our PCOS officer has now left us, and I just wondered if you are happy that the work that he or she's been doing will be continued appropriately.
Yes, Chair. Responsibility for PCOS, roughly in parallel to the officer's departure, is a long-standing officer. He's been running the system a number of years, 5 or 6, so he's very familiar with it. The responsibility for the operation of PCOS is now transferred to finance and procurement as part of the reshaping that's gone on. I'm not certain that the officer will be directly replaced on a like-for-like basis. However, there's now a team of people looking at a number of issues and a number of things. And so PCOS, if you like, is being brought into the fold, rather than being a bit separate, a bit distinct, perhaps a bit isolated, but having its own resource. Now it's receiving a pooled resource, but it's also being integrated much more closely with other efforts that's going on. So we don't, I mean, it's a shame because it's an unfortunate time. Transition, it would have been useful to have the officer continue for a bit longer and to pass on the benefits of his experience and knowledge, but he went before that, so they're picking up on that. But yes, there's something in place to address it.
Yeah, that maybe highlights the point that we've said before. People are leaving and nobody knows the job. They should do about 3 months in training folk that's got to replace them.
Not at this stage, Chair. Nothing to add, Chair.
The computer system where we had problems at 4.6 was taking upwards of 8 to 9 minutes to process a transaction, and obviously had an impact on payments and whatnot. Has that been resolved?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the 8-9 minutes problem has been resolved. That was resolved around about the mid to late October, although it did cause us quite considerable difficulties in the run-up to that, because, as I say, we were struggling to process and pay invoices.
The mic's not on. Have you heard any of that? Full council, 3.5, and we're here to do item 5.
No, Chair, it's a standing report. You've seen this mechanism before. There are no significant issues. The sort of delays in 1 or 2 recommendations being implemented, we're pretty well covered. So, yes, I'm not drawing your attention to anything particularly in this report on this occasion.
Members quite happy with this? Go to the recommendation?
Yep. Okay, Chair. Page 21 of 72, number 3, it's due March 17. Could you not just give us a kind of progress in there instead of not yet due? I think it'd been more beneficial if we'd had a kind of progress, well, to me anyway, that at least it's progressing and it will be ready by March.
With respect, Chair, to the councillor, no. The system we have is we report at the first point after they fall due. I think if you're asking me to track recommendations as we're going along, I'm afraid I'd be overwhelmed with all the diversity and all the nuances and all the adjustments. So for the sake of brevity in the committee, brevity in my presentation, and other reasons, I would very much prefer that I report to you at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much, Chair. Delighted to be working with the Council, and as you said, it is for a 5-year appointment, and getting to know you more and understanding the Council's key challenges and risks. This external audit plan is very much the first piece of our work with the Council, so it sets out how we discharge our responsibilities under the Audit Scotland Code of Practice, but also how we do that under international auditing standards, and that's a concept materiality which Lindsay will talk through. We also set out within our audit plan, we have wider scope responsibilities in accordance with the Audit Scotland Code of Practice. So that includes looking at aspects of the Council's governance, financial sustainability, value for money arrangements. And we work very closely with Audit Scotland around that in terms of the best value agenda. There were some questions there, Chair, that you asked. I think in terms of Brexit, from our perspective, that's really a watching picture in terms of what happens. It's just one of the many challenges out there at the moment, and a challenge that the Council will face at some point in time. In terms of the IJB review of governance, we are also the appointed external auditors of the IJB itself, and we're also, for information, the appointed auditors of NHS Dumfries and Galloway. In terms of the context of the plan, that was really looking at the Council's governance arrangements around the IJB, particularly thinking around how that's then consolidated and built into the Council's accounts, recognising that will be a change for this year. In terms of materiality and our audit risks, if I just ask Lindsay to touch on them.
Thank you, Joanne. Excuse me. So first of all, I would like to touch on materiality. So set out within page 34 of the papers is our consideration, both of the figures which we have identified and how we have calculated those. What I thought I would spend a little bit of time on first was just explaining what those relate to. So in relation to materiality, we identify a figure which is considered to be material. If individually or in aggregate, they could reasonably be expected to influence your decisions. We have considered the appropriate benchmark for that as gross expenditure. You will note that we have identified at a planning stage based on 2015-16 expenditure, a figure of 4.687 million. We will consider and update that as required at year end, but that should give you a good guide of where that figure will be. Just to complicate things slightly, we then have a separate figure around performance materiality, which is based at 65% of that figure, just over 3 million. That represents a figure set for the financial statements as a whole to reduce the probability of an uncorrected or undetected misstatement, and that those would exceed your materiality. So effectively in practice, what that drives is the level of testing that we perform, those figures which actually and balances that we wish to look at, and the level of testing performed. The third figure we set out is our trivial threshold, which is probably a little bit more straightforward, and that we report to you on every error that we know above that figure, so 234,000. So we will report to you every figure, every error noted above that, and also anything that we consider to be qualitatively material that we think you should be aware of. I will now progress just to take you through our consideration of audit risks. And in this case, we have two categories that we have highlighted to you within our report. We have significant audit risks, which are set out on page 35, and then other audit risks that are set out on the subsequent page. In relation to the significant audit risks, there are two risks which I would like to take you through today. The first is the mandated risk of management override of controls. I realise sometimes the wording raises eyebrows, but this is a mandatory risk, as I say, across every entity, and relates to management and their unique position to override the controls that they have in place. In practice, what that will consist of is our consideration of significant judgments and estimates for any indicators of bias, looking at journal entries as well, performing detailed procedures around those, and also thinking about anything unusual or significant which has arisen within the year. The second risk is a presumed risk around revenue recognition. You will note a slight change in wording. It's a presumed risk. We are able to rebut that in certain cases. You will note that we have not rebutted the risk fully, although we have noted that around grant income, actually, we do not consider that to be a significant risk. And we set out the procedures we will perform against that. Overleaf, we have set out what we consider other risks, so not significant enough that we wish to formally badge them as significant risks, but those that we still wish to draw to your attention and that we wish to report back to you on in due course. And the three risks that we've highlighted there are around the completeness of operating expenditure, completeness of employee remuneration, and then, as Joanne touched on, the consolidation of the Integration Joint Board, which has its first fully operational year this year, obviously. So I think those were the key points I was keen to highlight at that point, but I'm happy to hand over to you and to take any questions on our paper.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, it's pretty early to start scrutinising or looking at what you're going to come forward with. But just picking up on 2 points and maybe dealing with the first one in terms of what was given in terms of risk. And what I'm picking up is, it's very much on the significant and presumed risk. It's very much under control of finance and then revenue and so forth. But there's a third risk to me that we should be conscious of, and I hope that the auditors are conscious of, and that is the reputation of the council in terms of risk and public perception. in terms of some decisions that we may take that could put the council at risk in terms of its reputation. And if we could hear on that point whether that is going to be a feature within the audit control. The other part is to the one on page 32 in terms of IJB. And from anything that I have sat through in committee terms, more so in social work services committee, is this whole concept of governance as to where does actually accountability lie, control, responsibility. And to me, it's very much up in the air, where indeed the last report I got was that council offer governance, but it's not always accepted. And indeed, the Scottish Government are looking at standards officers as against a governance officer. So to me, there's a big issue in here in terms of IJB, monies crossing hands from council to IJB, the NHS saying what services, because there is a big concern in terms of social work services and where the control of that lies. If IJB are able to say, no, there's what, we're taking control of that, and where does the council lie? So, governance, IJB, and risk in terms of public perception and reputation to the council.
I think if I just pick up your first point then around public perception and council reputational risk, I see our remit in considering certain aspects of that under our wider scope audit responsibilities, which are set out on page 11 of the plan. For me, as part of that, we consider how the council develops and delivers best value, but we also look at commitment and leadership. How, as a council, do you manage reputational risk? How do you engage with the public perception? So that is very much, I think, wrapped up into that wider scope piece of audit, which we'll continue to look at certain aspects of over the next 5 years, based on where we think key areas of risk are for the council. So the first year we really see, in terms of wider scope, the bigger risk being around financial sustainability. But again, we will continue to look at themes such as what you touched on as part of that work. In terms of the IJB, we've not necessarily started a lot of work around the IJB, but I think as the external auditor of the council, I'd be really looking at the decision-making process around the IJB, the accountability for the money, and obviously, is the money accounted for correctly? I think personally, my personal view is IJBs are very complicated and they are continuing to evolve, and it'll be something just to look at in terms of governance and is there a particular area of governance risk for the council, and if we feel that we come across something like that, we'd then report that back to you in our annual report.
On the IJB, you say you're the external auditors for it as a whole. Does that not make it quite difficult for you to do it from our point of view as well? I mean, is that not a slight conflict?
Yes and no. I think there's not an easy answer around IJBs. I think where it's incredibly helpful is Paul works very closely with the Chief Finance Officer of the IJB, who's the Director of Finance of the NHS. So where it's extremely helpful is actually I'm able to sit with Paul and Katie Lewis at the same time to talk about the IJB structures and process and the money flows. We're also, from an external audit perspective, able to look at it as efficiently as we can by recognising there's balances in the council side of the equation, which we'll audit through our financial statement work anyway, and equally balances on the NHS. So in terms of the actual IJB audit itself, it's therefore quite carved out what we look at and quite efficient. And I think it's just the challenge on us as auditors is to be objective and look at it from both sides of the governance side in terms of what the directions say, council's position in the health board, and not get involved in the political aspect of that.
Is it you personally, or is it Grant Thornton as a company that are auditing? You know, are you doing all of it down here?
Yep. In terms of that, I'm looking after as the engagement leader for the IJB, the council, and the health board, given the connections there.
Wood?
Anyway, yeah, it was to do with page 36, and once again a continuation on the integrated joint board, where it makes a statement that you're concerned about the consolidated balances and the materially misstated as of the 31st of March. Can you clarify what you mean by that statement?
I think in terms of that, we've just flagged it more as a risk because it's the first year that you then, as a council, consolidate the IJB in. So in terms of the group accounting, is the group accounting correct? Could there be a material misstatement, potentially given the size of the numbers, and that's why we've considered it as being an other risk. But personally, I don't see there being a material misstatement. It's just about the process in the group and how that's flowed through.
But surely it will be easier to control it at the earlier stages than later on. Would that be a fair statement?
Have we any further questions for Joe or Lindsay? No? Is there anything else you want to bring up within your report?
No, just to highlight that as part of our introduction to the council, we did a handover with PwC, your previous external auditors, and we've been able to place reliance on their working papers around opening balances. And we've had some good initial discussions with Paul, Lorna and Gavin just to get up to speed for the council arrangements. So we're doing more of our work in the next month or so, looking up to the financial statements work across the summer.
We're just asked to note and comment on the external audit plan, and I think that's what we've done. Are we clear? Yes, okay, we're good. So thank you very much for coming, and I don't know who you'll see in the audit committee next time you're here, but I'm sure they'll be very diligent. Thank you very much. Now we go on to item 7, which is the Health and Safety Progress Report, which we've got Paul Clark in, and yes, absolutely, yeah, and we've got some exception reports just to deal with, perhaps. But if you want to, take us through?
Just Appendix 3 in the paperwork was a copy of Appendix 2, so you should have now been given a copy of the true Appendix 3, just as an admin. Would you like me to run through the report or just take question and answers? Yes. The building safety and service leader has now been appointed, so that vacancy has now been filled. Communications, the health and safety newsletter and briefings, we're now back up on target with that. The audit programme has been the challenge. So we're looking at target probably, as I said in the exception report, probably April, May to meet where we need to be for the year end.
I suppose the question is, have we done an inspection of the new school builds, given what's happened in other parts of the country, where there's been accidents with walls collapsing and things like that?
We're actually following that through just now. We've done preliminary work, but we're following it through, and there's been a specific request for information on that, so we're reviewing that and drawing that forward, yes.
Because I know that is carrying on, because the new build at Dalbeattie, there's either weekly and monthly check-ups with the building contractor, and I think Lindsay Baker for education.
I think, to be fair, it's probably that's learning from problems that we're really considering the ones that we've built in the past, that they are relatively robust.
We're certainly following through on that in some detail.
Any other questions on this report? Can we go to the recommendation, which is just to review the overall summary of performance at 2.1 And then we have asked about the exception reporting, which we've had a response to at 2.2. Thank you. Go to item 8, which is National Fraud Initiative, Dumfries and Galloway Council's participation. You anything to add to your report?
No, I've nothing further to add. Happy to take any questions that you have.
Kind of dealt with it a little bit in the first report we had, or second one, and so, I mean, seems to me that things are progressing and things are in place, which is what we've asked for, and that's good. So members have no questions. Are you happy?
To the point of view, Chair, I think it's good that the council's actually identified someone to actually deal with this sort of thing, rather than let it flow between 3 or 4 different people. So I think it gives us a degree of comfort, if you like, that these things are being looked at.
Heather, you're quite happy with the way things are going forward, and it says here to consider and discuss the self-assessment checklist questions. Is that that's quite difficult. Well, we're asking them, I suppose, but you're quite happy with those questions, that they're all being dealt with, are you?
Yes, I have. Just in response to your first point, I mean, I've certainly been heartened by how well received the support has been to the officers on the ground that are actually dealing with the data matching and the investigations. They've certainly welcomed a timeline, a more structured approach, and they certainly have, everybody's busy, but they've certainly responded well just with the wee reminders and the support that we're giving them. So, officers certainly are looking at it, and we're trying to just make sure that we're maintaining the right amount of balance on it in terms of how much input compared to what actual outcomes there are. So that is something that we'll be using management reports to keep an eye on, so as we get a feel for the resource input versus the actual fraud recovery. And in respect of your point about the question set, I had a quick look at it, and there weren't any areas.
Do you think we should just go through them? And I mean, they've got columns, yes. Yeah, I mean, would that be helpful for you? It's not for the committee; it's for you to do this, is it? Sorry,
yeah. Well, as I say, it was really just to help make you aware that question set was there, and I've certainly had a look at it, and based on the improved processes that we've put in place, there wasn't really anything to highlight as a significant area of concern at all. It is in our Financial Code 5 in respect of our participation on it, and that outlines a requirement to bring updates on an annual basis. And I said what I am starting to do this year moving forward is actually running the report so that we can see what outcomes there are. So certainly satisfied that we are actually on, we've got positive answers for each of those.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's in relation to the questions and what Heather described as the balance. And into it, this says the NFI, an integral part of our corporate policies and strategies to prevent the detection, fraud and error. And then it goes on to 7, do we review how frauds and errors arose and use this information to improve our internal controls? What I'm looking at is, we had a seminar earlier this week, I believe it was, in terms of welfare reform. We've got our anti-poverty strategy and an anti-poverty officer in place. It's really the balance to, is it fraud, was it an error, and how we proceed from there to recognise that there is abject poverty out there. It's really to hear from Heather in terms of this balance, that there is a balance, that we're not just pursuing people. You've been fraudulent where it may have been an error, or there's mitigating circumstances, around why the person got there and all that's entailed in that. So it's related 2 and 7, how we apply ourselves.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, Councillor Scobie. The purpose of the process, though, that Heather is undertaken is just to make sure that matching is done so that the problems are actually highlighted, and then it's for the departments to do investigations and come in. So, you know, with the greatest respect, Heather wouldn't really have a view on that. You'd have to ask that to the teams, the individual teams that are then assessing the evidence. Yeah, so apologies, but yeah. We can certainly get that reassurance from you, from the individual teams that would be dealing with the people and the anti-poverty would be dealing with. Yeah.
Members, so are we happy with the report and recommendations? 2.1 and 2.2. That's good. I have no further business, but I would just like to say that our chairman, who was meant to be here today, she sends her apologies and regrets not being here for the last meeting of Audit and Risk Management Committee, but I'm sure you know she's had bereavement, so she just wanted to say how much she's enjoyed her audit chairmanship and apologises for not being here for this final committee.
Okay, remember, should register our thanks to Councillor Dykes for the period she's spent. She's maybe got grey-headed right enough, but we won't look at that.
Thank you very much, Councillor McKee. Good. That's fine. I have no further business.